The rain hadn't stopped all night. It tapped restlessly against the window of a small, dim apartment, where the only light came from a flickering lamp on the kitchen counter. Piles of medical bills were scattered across the table, reminders of a battle she was slowly losing. Erasmus Mitchell sat with her elbows on the table, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders, eyes red from crying. The world outside went on. People laughed, cars moved, life pulsed. But inside this tiny apartment, time felt frozen. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat next to her, cold now. The sound of coughing came from the bedroom, soft, shallow, fragile. Her body tensed instantly. She got up, tiptoeing into the dimly lit room. On the small bed lay a little girl with tangled brown hair and pale lips. Her tiny chest rose and fell unevenly. "Emma," Erasmus whispered, brushing her daughter's forehead with trembling fingers. The 6-year-old stirred, but didn't wake. A faint smile curved her lips. "Mommy, the stars are out?" "Not tonight, sweetheart," Erasmus murmured, holding her small hand. "They're just hiding behind the rain," Emma nodded weakly, her breathing softening again as she drifted back to sleep. Erasmus lingered there, afraid to move, afraid the silence might break. When she finally returned to the kitchen, her phone buzzed with a reminder from the hospital. Final payment due within 72 hours. Her heart clenched. She already knew the number. She'd memorized it by now, $500,000 for a treatment in Switzerland. The doctor had said it was Emma's only chance. She sank into the chair, staring blankly at the bills. Her reflection shimmered in the cold window glass. A woman who looked much older than her 28 years, worn down by sleepless nights and fear. "How much does hope cost?" she whispered into the silence. No one answered. Her phone screen was still open from earlier. A search she hadn't dared to click on until now. Financial help for medical emergencies. Scrolling past ads and scams, her eyes caught on a post buried deep in a discussion forum. Marriage arrangement available. Confidential. 1-year term. Compensation. 1,000, and Erasmus stared at it, frozen. It sounded absurd. Immoral even. She clicked anyway. Looking for a discreet individual willing to enter a private marriage arrangement. Must maintain confidentiality for 1 year. Contractually binding. Compensation wired upon signing. Her pulse quickened. She scrolled through the comments, most of them filled with jokes, disbelief, warnings. But then she saw one reply from an anonymous user, 3 simple words. "It's real. Changed my life." Her breath caught. She knew it could be dangerous. But the hospital bills glared back at her, cold and merciless. Her hands shook as she opened a blank email draft. The cursor blinked, waiting. Subject: marriage arrangement inquiry. Body: single mother seeking marriage arrangement. Desperate for daughter's medical treatment. Will respect confidentiality. She hovered over the send button for what felt like hours. Outside, thunder rumbled across the city. Emma coughed again in the next room, the sound slicing through the air like glass. Erasmus pressed her lips together, tears streaming silently. Then she hit send. 3 days later, an email arrived. "Miss Mitchell, your application has been reviewed. You've been selected for consideration. Further details to follow. Confidentiality required." The sender's name was hidden behind a corporate alias, C. Holdings. Her breath quickened. She could almost hear her heart pounding. What was she doing? What if it was dangerous? But then she looked again at Emma's drawing pinned on the fridge, a stick-figure family holding hands under a smiling sun. And something inside her broke. A week later, she stood outside a government building, clutching a small bouquet of daisies in trembling hands. The city around her blurred, traffic, voices, laughter, all melting into a dull hum. Her dress was simple, cream-colored, borrowed from a friend. It was supposed to be her wedding day. Though nothing about it felt real, the contract had been signed. No press, no ceremony, no family. Just 2 witnesses, 1 lawyer, and a promise that this arrangement would remain secret for 12 months. Erasmus's palms were slick with sweat. She stared at the marble floor, heart pounding like a drum. Then she heard footsteps, firm, confident. She looked up. The man walking toward her was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. His presence seemed to draw every eye in the room. His expression was unreadable, calm, composed, powerful. When he stopped in front of her, the air seemed to still. He turned slightly, and their eyes met. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers. "Levi!" she whispered. His eyes widened. A flicker of disbelief crossed his face. "Erasmus?" The lawyer glanced between them, confused. "You two know each other?" Neither answered. They just stood there, staring. 2 ghosts from a past neither had buried. The silence between them was thick, electric. 5 years. 5 long years since the night they last saw each other. Levi swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "So it's you," he said quietly. "You're the one." Erasmus's breath trembled. "I didn't know it was you," she managed, voice breaking. A strange smile ghosted across his lips. Part pain, part fate. Looks like destiny has a cruel sense of humor. For the first time that night, she looked into the eyes of the man who once held her heart, and realized her desperation had just rewritten both their lives. 5 years earlier. New York in early spring. Sunlight spilled between skyscrapers, and the city smelled of wet pavement and blooming tulips. Life pulsed with energy. But for Erasmus Mitchell, it was just another day of survival. At 23, she worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a small public library, one tutoring children in the evenings. Her dreams of becoming a writer had been replaced by rent payments and fatigue. That Tuesday afternoon, she was shelving books when she heard a low, calm voice behind her. "Excuse me, do you have The Art of War?" She turned and froze. The man in front of her looked like someone who belonged to another world. Tall, dark hair swept back, an air of quiet command. His navy suit was too perfect for the dusty library aisles, and yet his eyes, storm grey and tired, didn't seem arrogant, just lost. "Section C3, she said softly, pointing to the far side of the room. He smiled, almost grateful. "Thanks." When he returned the next day, and the next, she realized he wasn't there for the books. His name was Levi Crawford, a young vice president at Crawford Enterprises. He was brilliant, ambitious, and already carrying the weight of a company older than both of them combined. Yet when he sat across from her at the library table, he looked nothing like the powerful man he was rumored to be. He looked peaceful. They started talking about literature, music, the absurdity of New York traffic. She made him laugh, and he made her feel seen. Over the next 2 weeks, those conversations turned into coffee breaks. Coffee breaks became dinners, and before either of them realized, they'd fallen into a quiet rhythm. 2 people who didn't mean to fall in love, but did anyway. By the 3rd week, they were inseparable. Levi would show up after work, loosen his tie and help her close the library. Sometimes they'd walk along the Hudson, watching the lights ripple on the water. "You know what I envy about you?" he asked one night, his breath fogging in the cold air. "What?" She smiled. "You live simply. You see beauty in things I don't even notice anymore." She laughed softly. "That's just because I can't afford chaos." He reached for her hand. "Maybe chaos isn't always bad." She looked up, and in that moment, under the dim glow of the riverside lamps, he kissed her. The world went still. Their love lasted a month, short but enough to etch itself into memory. Every evening she'd wait for his call, and every morning she'd wake up smiling. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in something better. But on the 32nd day, everything changed. Levi arrived at her apartment looking pale, his tie loose, his voice tense. "My father collapsed this morning. Stroke. They're flying him to Boston tonight," he said.
"I have to go." She took his hand.
"Then I'll go with you," he shook his head.
"It's going to get complicated."
The board's panicking. Investors are circling like sharks.
"I just need to handle it, then come back," she whispered. "I will," he promised.
He kissed her, desperate, final. And then he was gone. 2 weeks passed. Then a month. Erasmus sent messages that went unanswered. Calls went straight to voicemail. She scrolled through the news one night and felt her stomach twist. Levi Crawford engaged to heiress of the Greenhill Group to stabilize corporate merger. She dropped her phone. The world blurred. That same night, she realized she was late. 2 pink lines on a plastic stick confirmed what her trembling heart already knew. 2 months later, after sleepless nights and fading hope, she made a decision. She would find him, not to beg, not to accuse, but to tell him the truth. She took a train downtown, clutching a worn envelope, the ultrasound photo inside. The glass tower of Crawford Enterprises loomed above her, silver and merciless. At the reception desk she managed to speak. "I'm here to see Mr. Levi Crawford," the receptionist smiled politely, typing something. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But please tell him it's Erasmus Mitchell."
"He knows me." The woman hesitated, then picked up the phone, whispering to someone.
After a pause, she hung up.
"I'm sorry, Mr. Crawford isn't available. He's in a meeting in London this week." Erasmus's heart sank. "Can I leave him something?"
The receptionist nodded.
"Of course." She placed the envelope on the counter, hands trembling.
"Please make sure he gets this," the woman smiled sympathetically. "I will." But as Erasmus walked away, she caught sight of a security guard tossing the envelope into a bin marked unverified deliveries. She froze, wanted to turn back, to shout. But her courage broke. She left the building in tears, clutching her stomach. That evening, she wrote in her journal, "If he ever looks for me, he'll find us. Until then, I'll protect our child, even if he never knows she exists." And with that, Erasmus disappeared from Levi Crawford's world, a ghost buried under time, secrets, and the fragile heartbeat growing inside her. The world had changed in 5 years. Or maybe it was Levi who had. Crawford Enterprises had risen from the ashes of its near collapse. The name Levi Crawford now appeared in every finance magazine, every most powerful men in America list, his signature worth millions on contracts that reshaped industries. He had everything: wealth, reputation, control. And yet, every night when he came home to the vast, empty penthouse overlooking the city, silence followed him like a shadow. He'd pour a glass of whiskey, stare out at the skyline, and wonder why success felt so hollow. He had built an empire, but lost the only thing that had ever made him human. Her Erasmus. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years. He didn't even know why she haunted him still.
Maybe because she never asked him for anything.
Maybe because when she smiled, he'd believed for a brief moment that he was more than just a product of business deals and legacy. But she had vanished, and he had let her. He never looked for her, convincing himself it was better that way. He had an engagement, obligations, a company to save. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford until the day she walked back into his life, wearing a simple cream dress and fear in her eyes. The courthouse was cold and echoing. Levi had arrived early, ready to sign another faceless contract with a business arrangement, nothing more. He hadn't cared who the woman was. The marriage was a technicality, a clause in a private legal arrangement involving offshore investment and public optics. Then she appeared. When she turned toward him, time fractured. "Erasmus!" His voice came out hoarse, disbelieving. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers, scattering white daisies across the marble floor. "Levi," she whispered, the name trembling on her lips. For a long moment, neither moved. The officiant cleared his throat, shuffling papers awkwardly. "Shall we begin?" But they just stared at each other, two people bound by a past neither had dared to remember. Levi finally tore his gaze away, jaw tightening. "Let's get this over with." The ceremony was short, mechanical. Their hands touched briefly when signing the papers, a touch that burned through years of silence. When it was done, Levi turned to her, voice low. "Why are you here, Erasmus?" She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "Because I needed help," he frowned. "Financial help?" She didn't answer, just looked away, clutching her purse as if it held her entire world. Something in his chest twisted. Anger, confusion, something deeper. "I suppose that's the only reason anyone ever comes back," he muttered. And with that, he left. Later that evening, he couldn't focus on work. The image of her, standing small and nervous in that courthouse, replayed in his mind. He told himself to forget it. But the more he tried, the clearer she became. Finally, near midnight, he called his assistant. "Find out where she lives." The next morning, his black Mercedes pulled up outside a narrow apartment building in Brooklyn. Levi hesitated before stepping out. It felt absurd. The billionaire CEO sneaking into a place where the walls were cracked and children's laughter echoed faintly through the halls. He found her door, 3B. He raised his hand to knock and froze when he heard a small,
Soft voice inside. "Mommy, can I have pancakes?"
His heart stopped. A child. He hesitated, then knocked gently. The door opened, and Erasmus stood there, wearing a worn cardigan and surprise in her eyes. "Levi, what are you doing here?" He didn't answer. His gaze had already drifted past her, to the little girl sitting at the small table, legs swinging, dark brown curls tied with a pink ribbon. She looked up, and his world tilted. Those eyes, steel grey just like his. Erasmus followed his gaze and froze. "Levi," she whispered. The little girl tilted her head curiously. "Mommy, who's that?" Levi's throat went dry. He crouched instinctively, leveling his eyes with the child's. "Hi," he said quietly. "I'm Levi," the girl blinked. "You're tall." He couldn't help it. He laughed. A genuine startled sound that seemed foreign to him. Erasmus stepped forward quickly.
"Emma, sweetheart, why don't you finish your breakfast?"
Emma nodded and returned to her pancakes. Levi stood, his gaze locked on Erasmus. "Her name's Emma," she nodded. "How old is she?" Erasmus hesitated, then said softly, 6. He stared at her, the math already done.
6 years.
Just long enough to erase any doubt. The air grew heavy. He stepped closer. "You should have told me." Her eyes filled with tears.
"I wanted to."
"But you were gone."
"I came to your office, Levi. They said you were in London." He remembered that week. The chaos, the meetings, the headlines.
And suddenly he saw it all clearly. "You came for me." "I did," she whispered.
"But you were already engaged." He exhaled sharply, looking away, shame flickering across his features.
"It wasn't real. It was a business deal, one that fell apart months later." Silence stretched between them, filled with years of lost chances. Finally, he looked back at her. Really looked. She was thinner, tired, but there was still that quiet strength in her eyes. The same light that once made him believe in something beyond ambition. "I want to see her medical file," he said suddenly. "What?" "You said you needed help."
"Tell me what she needs." Erasmus's lips trembled.
"The doctors say there's treatment in Switzerland. But it costs $500,000, Levi nodded once. I'll handle it, her eyes widened. Levi, I didn't come to ask, I know. His voice softened. But I'm a father. You don't need to ask. For the first time in years, Erasmus's composure broke. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks as she whispered, Thank you. Levi looked past her to Emma, who was now humming softly to herself. He felt something shift inside, something warm, unfamiliar, terrifyingly real. He turned back to Erasmus. Pack your things. We're going to Switzerland. As he walked out of the apartment, his heart pounded for reasons that had nothing to do with business. For the first time in 5 years, Levi Crawford had something worth fighting for. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Sharp, sterile, unforgiving. Levi had never liked hospitals. They reminded him too much of ending. His father's last breath, the hollow silence afterward, the way grief always found its way through even the cleanest white walls. But this time, the hospital didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. He stood in the doorway of the pediatric ward, dressed in his usual black suit, looking completely out of place among pastel murals and tiny chairs. His hand tightened around the bouquet of white lilies he had brought. He'd Googled flowers for children, unsure if such a thing even existed. Through the glass window, he saw her. Emma sat on the bed, a small figure in a sea of white sheets, her hair tied in 2 uneven braids. A teddy bear rested in her lap. She was colouring something, messy strokes of blue and yellow that didn't stay within the lines, and when she smiled, the room brightened in a way no lamp could imitate. Levi felt something shift in his chest, a tightness he couldn't name. Erasmus sat beside her, reading from a picture book, her voice soft and rhythmic. When she looked up and saw him standing there, her eyes widened slightly. But she didn't speak. She simply nodded. A silent permission. Levi stepped inside. "Mommy," Emma chirped. "He's here again." Erasmus smiled faintly. "Yes, sweetheart. This is Mr. Crawford." Levi knelt beside the bed, his expensive suit creasing against the floor.
"Hi, Emma," she blinked, studying him. "You look like someone from a movie," he chuckled.
"Is that good or bad?" "Depends," she said thoughtfully, tapping her chin. "Do you play the good guy or the bad guy?" Levi glanced at Erasmus, who hid a small smile behind her hand.
"I'm trying to be the good guy." Emma seemed satisfied with that. "Then you can sit next to Mr. Teddy. He doesn't like sitting alone, so he did."
He sat beside her, awkward at first, unsure where to put his hands. She went back to colouring, completely at ease. "What are you drawing?" he asked after a moment. "A house," she said.
With a big window so Mommy can see the stars even when it rains." Levi swallowed hard.
"That's a good idea. Do you like stars?" "I used to," he admitted.
"I stopped looking for a while." She looked up, frowning as if that was the saddest thing she'd ever heard. "That's silly."
"The stars don't stop shining just because you stop looking." Something in him broke at that. Quiet, tender, unstoppable. He didn't say anything more, afraid his voice would betray him. Instead, he watched her colour, watched the way her small hands gripped the crayon, the way she hummed tunelessly, and he realized how many years he had missed. When the nurse came to adjust the IV, Emma winced slightly. Levi's hand moved on instinct, covering hers. "It's okay," he murmured.
"I've got you." She blinked up at him. "You sound like Mommy." That made Erasmus freeze for a heartbeat.
She looked away, pretending to arrange the flowers Levi had brought. After the nurse left, Levi stayed quiet, just watching Emma's breathing even out again. "How long has she been here?" he asked softly. 3 weeks, Erasmus replied. "She gets tired easily, but she tries to be brave." He nodded, jaw tight. "The treatment in Switzerland, how soon can we start?" "The doctor said they can take her next week, but they need confirmation of payment before scheduling." Levi reached into his jacket and pulled out a document folder. "Already handled." Erasmus's eyes widened.
Levi, you can't just— I can, he said firmly.
And I will. She hesitated, torn between gratitude and pride.
You don't owe me anything. I owe her everything. He nodded toward Emma. She's—
Mine too. For a moment the truth hung heavy between them. Fragile, beautiful, undeniable. Later that afternoon, Levi returned to Emma's room with a small gift bag. Inside was a simple music box, painted pale blue. "What's this?" Emma asked, shaking it gently. "Open it," Levi said. She lifted the lid. A soft tune began to play. Clair de Lune, gentle and shimmering. Her eyes widened.
It's so pretty.
"My mom gave me one just like it when I was little," Levi said quietly.
It helped me sleep.
"Thought maybe it could help you too." Emma held it close. "Thank you, Mr. Levi." He smiled. Not his usual tight, polite smile, but a real one that reached his eyes. "You can just call me Levi," she giggled. "Okay, Levi." Erasmus watched the exchange from the corner, her heart full and aching all at once. For years, she had carried the fear that Levi would reject Emma, that he would see her as a mistake. But here he was, sitting cross-legged on the hospital floor, letting Emma braid his hair with a pink ribbon she found in her toy box. "Perfect," Emma declared proudly. Levi caught his reflection in the window and laughed. Actually laughed. "I look ridiculous." "You look happy," Erasmus murmured without thinking. He looked up, meeting her gaze. The laughter faded, replaced by something deeper. For the first time, he didn't hide it. As evening settled, the nurses dimmed the lights. Emma yawned, hugging her teddy bear. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked sleepily. Levi brushed a stray curl from her forehead.
Every day if you want me to. Promise, he smiled. Promise. She closed her eyes, still clutching the music box.
The soft melody played on, filling the quiet room. Erasmus whispered, "She likes you." Levi's voice was low, rough with emotion.
I don't deserve that. Maybe not, she said gently.
But she gives love easily. It's her gift. He nodded, his gaze lingering on the small, sleeping figure.
She's
everything I didn't know I needed. When he left that night, the hallway lights flickered above him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man walking away from something. He felt like a man finally walking towards something worth keeping. The hospital had grown quiet. It was late, close to midnight. The faint hum of machines echoed through the hallway, blending with the rhythmic sound of rain against the windows. Inside Emma's room, the little girl slept soundly, clutching her teddy bear and the small blue music box Levi had given her. Its melody had long faded, but the silence it left behind was soft, peaceful. Erasmus pulled the blanket up to her daughter's chin, kissed her forehead, and turned off the bedside lamp. Then she stepped into the dim corridor, where Levi waited, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. Neither spoke for a long moment. He was staring through the glass, eyes fixed on Emma. The glow from the hallway lights made his reflection blur beside hers. A father and daughter, together at last, separated by a pane of glass and 5 lost years. "She looks like you," he said finally, his voice quiet, almost reverent. Erasmus leaned on the opposite wall,
arms crossed loosely. Everyone says she has your eyes. Levi gave a short, breathless laugh.
Guess there's no denying it then. They stood in silence again, the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. Finally, Erasmus said, "I never wanted to hide her from you." He turned, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "But you did," she nodded. "I did."
"'Cause I was scared." Levi exhaled slowly, his voice rough.
"Scared of me?"
"Scared of losing her," she whispered.
"Scared of what you'd say, what you'd do?"
"I thought you'd already moved on, that I was just a mistake you forgot." He closed his eyes, jaw tightening.
"I never forgot." The confession hung in the air, fragile and raw. "I looked for you," he admitted after a pause. "For months. But you disappeared." No address, no phone.
I thought maybe you didn't want to be found. Erasmus's throat tightened.
I came to your office, Levi, 2 months after you left. I left an envelope with your name on it. It had the ultrasound picture. Levi blinked, stunned.
He stopped, realization dawning in his eyes. My God, the receptionist. She threw it away, Erasmus said softly. I saw it. I wanted to go back and scream at her, but I didn't have the strength. Levi pressed a hand to his forehead, his composure cracking. 5 years? I could have been there. I should have been there. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice stayed steady.
You weren't ready then. You were drowning, Levi, in your father's death, in the company, in the life you never chose.
I didn't want to be another burden. He looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time since that night in the courthouse,
the coldness in his eyes thawed. You were never a burden, he said quietly. She gave a small, bitter smile. Then why does it still hurt like one? He didn't answer right away. The only sound was the faint creak of the fluorescent lights above them. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. Because I let it happen. I let us happen like something temporary, when you were the only thing that ever felt real. Erasmus's breath caught. Don't say things like that. Why not? He asked.
They're true, because it's too late. Levi stepped closer, eyes searching hers. Is it? Her voice trembled. You think love just waits untouched for 5 years?
He hesitated, then said softly, Yes. I think some things never stop waiting. The words hit her like a heartbeat she'd tried to forget. She turned away, staring out the window where the rain streaked down the glass. After a long silence, Levi spoke again, quieter this time. When I saw her today, Emma, something in me changed.
I didn't think I could still feel anything.
But she smiled, and suddenly I wasn't angry anymore.
Not at you, not at life, just tired of losing things. Erasmus blinked back tears.
You didn't lose her, Levi. You found her. He nodded, voice cracking. And I'm not letting go again. For a while, neither spoke. The rain outside softened into a drizzle. The city lights shimmered faintly through the window. Distant, blurred, but still beautiful. Levi turned toward her, taking a cautious step closer.
I want to be there. Why for her, for you? No contracts, no conditions. Erasmus's lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. This isn't that simple, I know, he said.
But I also know that walking away once nearly destroyed me.
I won't make that mistake again. She looked at him, the man she had loved, hated, missed, and saw not the CEO the world admired,
but the young man who once stood outside her apartment in the rain, promising he'd come back. Her voice was barely audible.
I don't know if I can trust you again. Levi's gaze softened. Then don't. Not yet. Just...
Let me try. For the first time, she didn't say no. They stood side by side, staring at the small window to Emma's room. Inside, their daughter slept peacefully, a fragile link binding two broken hearts. After a while, Erasmus whispered, Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't lost each other? He smiled faintly.
Every day, her chest tightened. And what do you think?
He turned to her, his expression gentle.
That maybe...
We were meant to find each other now. When it matters most. Erasmus swallowed hard, unable to look away. The hallway seemed smaller suddenly, the air thicker with everything unsaid. Levi reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. On it were 4 words written in his careful handwriting. No more running, ever. He handed it to her, a silent vow. Erasmus took it, fingers brushing his. For a moment neither breathed. Then she whispered, Okay. When he finally left that night, she stood by the window, watching his car disappear into the rain. And for the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a mistake. The snow fell like whispers over Zurich, soft and unhurried. Outside the window of the clinic, the world looked peaceful. a white canvas untouched by noise or haste. Levi stood at the window, his reflection framed by the falling snow. Behind him, the quiet hum of medical machines filled the air. It had been 4 days since they arrived in Switzerland, and already the rhythm of their lives had changed. No business calls,
No board meetings.
no reporters chasing headlines. Just 3 people, a father, a mother, and a little girl learning to be brave. Emma sat on the bed, drawing with crayons the nurse had given her.
Look, Mommy, it's us.
She said proudly. Erasmus leaned closer, smiling.
That's beautiful, sweetheart. Levi came over, curious.
In Emma's drawing, 3 stick figures stood hand in hand beneath a big sun and a crooked rainbow. The smallest figure had a bright yellow dress. The tallest one, him, had hair sticking straight up. "You made me look like a pineapple," Levi said, feigning seriousness. Emma giggled. "You said I could draw however I want." "That's true," he admitted, surrendering. "A very artistic pineapple." Erasmus laughed quietly, and for a fleeting moment everything felt normal. Not hospitals or illness, just family. They settled into a strange kind of peace. Mornings began with Emma's laughter echoing through the sterile halls as Levi tried, and failed, to braid her hair. Afternoons were for walks in the courtyard. Erasmus wrapped in a wool scarf, Levi pushing Emma's wheelchair through the snow-dusted paths. He pointed out constellations in the sky, told stories of faraway places he had seen. She told him about her favorite storybooks and how pancakes tasted better when Mommy burned them a little. He'd never known that kind of happiness. Quiet, ordinary, undeserved. One afternoon they sat together in the hospital cafe, sunlight filtering through the glass roof. Emma sipped her hot chocolate, her nose dusted with cocoa powder. Levi leaned back, watching her with a look Erasmus couldn't quite describe, something between awe and grief. "She doesn't even realize how strong she is," he murmured. Erasmus followed his gaze. "She's stronger than both of us combined," he nodded.
I keep thinking,
"What if she gets better and forgets all this? The pain, the hospitals, the fear?"
that's what we want, isn't it?
Levi looked at her, eyes soft. "Yes, but I also want her to remember that she was never alone." The words made Erasmus's heart twist. She looked down at her hands, the steam from her cup curling between them. "You're good with her," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "I'm learning." Then after a pause he added, "You were right, you know."
About me, she looked up, surprised.
"About what?"
About being scared. I thought power would protect me.
"That if I had enough control, I'd never be hurt again. And now?" He exhaled. "Now I know the only thing that ever mattered was what I walked away from." Their eyes met, and stayed there for just a heartbeat too long. That evening,
Erasmus stood by the window of their shared apartment suite.
watching the snow swirl beneath the streetlights. The city glowed gold and white, serene and distant. Levi came up behind her, his voice low. "You're quiet tonight," she smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About what happens after," he frowned.
After?
"When Emma gets better," she said softly. "When the treatment's done. You'll go back to New York, back to your life." He didn't answer at first. "And you think I'll just leave?"
I think people return to what they know, she said, her voice steady but sad. And your world isn't here, Levi. It never was. He turned her gently by the shoulders.
"You really believe that?" Erasmus met his gaze. "You belong to that world of contracts and headlines."
I belong here. In small classrooms, late-night coffee, crayons and music boxes. Levi's eyes darkened. You talk like we're from different planets, aren't we?
She whispered. He wanted to argue, to insist that she was wrong. But when he saw the fear in her eyes, he understood. She wasn't pushing him away out of pride. She was protecting herself from hope. He reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "I'm not leaving," she smiled weakly.
Don't promise things you can't keep. I don't break promises anymore. Erasmus hesitated,
Searching his eyes, the man who once walked away.
now standing before her as if he'd never left. Levi.
She began, but he stopped her with a whisper. Just let me be here. Tonight. No tomorrow, no after. Just now. She didn't reply, just nodded faintly, and so they stood together side by side, watching the snow fall quietly over a world that suddenly didn't seem so cold. Later that night, when she checked on Emma, the little girl was fast asleep, her small hand resting on the music box that played Claire de Lune. Levi stood in the doorway, watching. She looks peaceful. She always sleeps best after the snow, Erasmus whispered. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what she gets from you. She turned to him. What do you mean? You both make the world quieter, he said simply. For a moment, she couldn't speak. When he left the room, Erasmus stayed behind, her hand resting lightly on her daughter's. Through the open door, she could still hear his footsteps fading down the hallway. Steady, deliberate, like a man trying to keep his promise. She closed her eyes, a silent prayer forming in her chest. Please don't let this be temporary. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft, endless, and full of fragile hope. The morning of the procedure came quietly, too quietly. Snow still covered the streets outside the Zurich clinic, muffling the city's sounds. The world seemed to hold its breath. Inside, Erasmus helped Emma change into a hospital gown patterned with tiny blue stars. The little girl tried to be brave, but her small hands trembled as she clutched her teddy bear. Levi knelt beside her, straightening the ribbon in her hair. You ready, superstar? Emma nodded, but her voice came out small. Will it hurt? He hesitated, then said softly, A little, but I'll be right here the whole time.
I promise. She looked up at him, trusting completely. And I'm not scared? Erasmus turned away, swallowing hard.
She could hold herself together. She always had. But seeing her daughter so fragile beside Levi's calm strength made her chest ache with both pride and pain. Hours later, the operating room lights flickered to life. Erasmus waited behind the observation glass, her palms pressed against the cold surface, eyes locked on the tiny figure lying motionless under the white sheets. Levi stood beside her, silent, his jaw tight, every muscle in his body tense. The doctor's voices blurred together, clinical, practiced, detached. The beeping machines formed a rhythm that neither of them could escape. She's strong, one nurse murmured. But Erasmus saw the way Emma's small body jerked when the anesthetic took hold, and something inside her cracked. Levi's hand found hers before she even realized he'd moved. His grip was firm, grounding. She's going to be okay, he whispered, though his voice trembled. Erasmus wanted to believe him, but the truth was none of them knew. Minutes became hours. The snow outside turned to sleet, streaking the windows with silver lines. At one point, Levi left the observation deck. Erasmus followed him, finding him in the corridor, standing with both hands braced against the wall, head bowed. She's so small, he said hoarsely.
How is she supposed to fight something like this?
Erasmus's eyes softened. The same way you did, Levi, by not giving up. He turned toward her, his face pale. I don't deserve her.
Oh, you... Stop, she whispered.
You're here now.
That's what matters, he laughed bitterly.
You think being here fixes anything? It fixes everything that really counts. For a long moment they just stood there, the storm outside echoing the storm inside them. When the surgeon finally emerged hours later,
both of them rushed forward. She's stable, he said, his accent thick.
The procedure was successful, but the next 48 hours are critical. Erasmus almost collapsed with relief. Levi caught her before she hit the ground, holding her close. His voice was rough.
She made it. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded.
She made it. That night, neither of them left the hospital. Erasmus sat beside Emma's bed, stroking her daughter's hand while Levi paced near the window, unable to stay still. Outside, the snow had started again, swirling like soft ghosts in the lamplight. "She looks peaceful," Levi murmured.
Coming to stand behind Erasmus. "She always does after a storm," Erasmus said quietly. He looked down at the sleeping child.
Then at Erasmus, her eyes red, but still full of that same unshakable gentleness. "You've been doing this alone for 6 years," he said.
"How?" She smiled faintly.
"Mothers don't get to ask how. We just do." He sat down across from her, elbows on his knees, staring at his daughter. "I missed her first words, her first steps.
Her birthdays. I missed everything." Erasmus shook her head.
You're here for the hardest part. That's what she'll remember." Levi's voice dropped to a whisper. "I should have found you sooner." She turned to him, her voice equally soft. "You found us when it mattered." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, wordless and tender. Hours slipped by. The monitors beeped steadily, the only sound in the darkened room. Levi sat with his head resting on his arms beside the bed. Erasmus leaned against the chair, exhaustion pulling at her. At some point, Emma stirred, her small voice barely audible.
"Daddy?"
Levi's head shot up, eyes wide.
"Yeah, baby girl. I'm here," she smiled weakly. "You didn't leave." He took her hand, voice breaking. "Never again." Erasmus covered her mouth, trying not to cry. Emma blinked slowly, drifting back to sleep.
"Good. I was scared the stars wouldn't find us here." Levi brushed a tear from his cheek.
"They found us," he whispered.
"They always do." The next morning, the doctors confirmed she was stable. The worst had passed. Levi stepped outside into the crisp air, running a hand through his hair. He looked utterly drained, but alive in a way Erasmus had never seen before. She followed him, wrapping her coat tighter. "You didn't sleep?" He shook his head.
"Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the machines." Erasmus hesitated, then reached for his hand.
"She's going to be okay," he squeezed back gently. "Because of you?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Because of us." He turned toward her, the morning light catching the snow in his hair. For a moment he just looked at her. The woman who had once been his past, and was now standing here as his present. "I don't know what I did to deserve a second chance," he said softly. "But I won't waste it." Erasmus smiled faintly. "Then don't," he exhaled, a sound between relief and wonder. "You're not the same woman I left, and you're not the same man who walked away." He nodded slowly. Maybe that's the point. That evening, when the clinic lights dimmed and the world outside glowed blue with snowlight, Erasmus sat by the window watching Levi read a bedtime story to Emma. His voice was gentle, his hand steady as he turned each page. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow, because tonight they had survived together. The snow had begun to melt, leaving behind thin rivers glistening under the Swiss sun. A week had passed since Emma's surgery, 7 long, tender days of recovery, of quiet laughter and hesitant smiles. Erasmus stood by the clinic window, watching her daughter chase sunlight across the room in a wheelchair. The sound of Emma's giggles filled the space like music, fragile but alive. Behind her, Levi entered with 2 cups of coffee. His sleeves were rolled up, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He looked younger, lighter, as though the ice that had once defined him was finally thawing. "She's getting stronger," he said softly, handing her a cup. Erasmus nodded. "She is. Every day, a little more." They stood in silence for a while, watching Emma talk to her nurse about the little snowmen outside the window. Then Levi's voice broke the calm. "There's something I need to tell you." Erasmus turned, sensing the weight in his tone. "What is it?" He hesitated, a pause long enough to make her uneasy. Then he met her eyes. "When I saw your application for the marriage arrangement—"
I recognized you. The words landed like a sudden gust of cold air. Erasmus blinked.
"What?" "I wasn't sure at first," Levi continued quietly. "The name was different, the photo was small. But the handwriting—"
The way you wrote about your daughter, it felt like you. Her breath caught. You mean you knew?
He nodded, guilt flickering across his face.
Not completely.
"I wasn't sure until you walked into that room on our wedding day, but part of me hoped."
Prayed it was you. Erasmus stared at him, heart pounding.
"You mean this wasn't a coincidence?" He shook his head. "No, I chose you, Erasmus. I told my assistant to reach out to make the offer." The coffee cup trembled in her hand. She set it down before it fell. "So the entire thing, the contract, the money, it was all—"
What, a test?
Levi stepped closer. "No, not a test."
A chance? A chance for what?
She demanded, her voice rising. "To fix what you broke 5 years ago?" His eyes darkened. "To make it right?"
I didn't know about Emma, Erasmus. I didn't even know you were alive. She shook her head, tears glinting.
"You had a choice. You always had a choice. You could have asked."
You could have looked for me. I did.
He snapped, then stopped, forcing his tone softer. "After my father's death, I searched. You vanished."
Your phone number changed, your address. Nothing. Because I had to protect my baby, she cried. I was 22, Levi. I had no one.
"And every time I saw your name in the news, the parties, the women, I told myself you didn't care." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing.
That's not fair. No, she whispered. It's the truth. For a long moment, neither spoke.
Only the rhythmic ticking of the clock filled the room, echoing like a metronome counting down the seconds between two broken hearts. Finally, Levi exhaled, voice trembling. "When I saw Emma, I knew I'd failed both of you. But I swear I didn't choose you out of guilt." Erasmus crossed her arms, tears still glistening but her voice steady. "Then why?" He met her gaze. "Because I never stopped loving you." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the wind lifted the last patches of snow from the trees.
Inside, Erasmus's heart twisted painfully, because part of her wanted to believe him. She turned away,
looking out the window toward Emma. "You can't just walk back into my life and say that like it fixes everything." Levi's voice softened. "I'm not asking for forgiveness."
I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Erasmus closed her eyes, her emotions torn between anger and something that felt dangerously like hope.
"I don't know if I can trust you again." "Then let me prove it," he said simply. Their eyes met, raw, honest, and tired. For a fleeting second, Erasmus saw not the CEO, not the man who'd once broken her heart, but the boy who used to sketch her smile on napkins in a New York cafe 5 years ago. She whispered, "You still keep secrets, Levi." He gave a faint, sad smile. "Only the kind that lead me back to you." That night, Emma begged them to stay while she fell asleep. Levi sat on one side of the bed, Erasmus on the other. "Tell me a story," Emma said sleepily. "A happy one," Levi smiled faintly. "Once upon a time, there was a man who lost everything because he didn't protect what mattered most. Years later, he found them again, and he never let go." Emma giggled softly, eyes half closed. "That's a good story." Erasmus blinked back tears. "It's not finished yet." Levi's eyes found hers. "Not yet," he agreed. But the fragile calm shattered just before dawn. Erasmus woke to the sound of alarms, sharp, piercing beeps echoing down the hall. She rushed out of her room, heart hammering. Nurses sprinted past, their voices urgent.
Pediatric ICU, room 312.
Room 312, Emma's room. Erasmus froze, the world tilting violently.
No, no.
Levi appeared from the other side of the hall, barefoot, his shirt half-buttoned. "What's happening?" Before she could answer, the door slammed open, revealing doctors surrounding Emma's bed. "She's coding!" someone shouted.
Get the crash cart!
Erasmus tried to run to her daughter, but Levi caught her, holding her tightly as she screamed.
Emma, let me go! Erasmus, you can't! Let me go!
Tears streamed down her face, her cries raw and desperate.
Levi's arms tightened, his own voice breaking. "We're not losing her!" he whispered fiercely.
"Not again." She turned to him, eyes wide with terror.
"Please, Levi," he cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze.
"Look at me. She's strong, just like you."
"She'll fight." And for the first time,
she saw that the man holding her, the same man who once walked away, now looked like someone who would never leave again. As the doctors worked behind the glass, Erasmus clung to Levi, their tears mixing as the night swallowed the sound of sirens. The world outside the ICU was a blur of sterile light and muffled footsteps. Time had stopped. Erasmus sat in the hallway, knees pulled to her chest, arms trembling. Her sweater was soaked with tears, her hair disheveled, her lips pale. Through the glass window she could see the faint rhythm of the monitor beside Emma's bed, a fragile reminder that her little girl was still fighting. Levi stood a few steps away, pacing. He had spoken to every doctor, called every specialist, offered to fly in teams from New York. But there was nothing more to do now except wait. When he finally turned toward her, the exhaustion on his face mirrored her own. "She's stable," he whispered, voice hoarse. "But it's critical. They said the next 24 hours will decide everything." Erasmus nodded weakly, unable to form words. He knelt beside her, hesitated, then took her cold hands into his. "You need to eat something." She shook her head.
"I can't. Not until I know she's okay." Levi's eyes softened. "Erasmus!"
"She's stronger than we think. You've made her that way." Her lip quivered. "What if I made her strong just so she could fight alone?" He squeezed her hand tighter. "She's not alone. Neither are you." For a long moment they just sat there, two people bound by pain, surrounded by the rhythmic hum of machines and whispered prayers. Hours passed. The night deepened. Erasmus fell asleep on the cold hospital bench, her head resting on Levi's shoulder.
He didn't move.
He sat there, unmoving, watching the lights on the monitor blink in steady green. At dawn, the sky began to lighten behind the Alps, pale gold on the horizon. The nurses changed shifts. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Levi finally spoke, voice barely audible. "I used to think power could fix anything," he murmured. "That if I worked harder, earned more, I could control life itself." Erasmus stirred beside him, eyes half open. He looked at her, his expression heavy with regret. "But when I saw Emma in that bed—"
I realized how small I am. How helpless. Erasmus reached up, brushed his knuckles gently.
"You were there." "That's what matters." Levi's throat tightened.
"I should have been there 5 years ago. You can't change the past," she whispered.
"But you can stay now." Their eyes met. And in that stillness, a fragile promise formed, unspoken, but real. By the second night, fatigue turned into delirium. The beeping of the machines had become a cruel lullaby. Erasmus sat beside Emma's bed, holding her tiny hand. "You promised we'd go home soon, remember?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You said you'd draw Daddy a picture." Levi stood behind her, watching. Every breath Emma took felt like a miracle. Suddenly the monitor gave a short, irregular beep.
Erasmus froze. "No." "No, please." Doctors rushed in.
Levi pulled her back gently as they worked.
"Stay with me," he murmured, voice trembling. "She's fighting, Erasmus."
"She's fighting!" Erasmus buried her face in his chest, sobbing.
"I can't lose her. I can't!" He held her tighter, his heart pounding against hers.
"You won't. Not again." Minutes felt like hours.
Then a steady tone.
The monitor returned to rhythm. The lead doctor looked up, breathless but smiling. She's stable. She made it. Erasmus collapsed into Levi's arms, shaking uncontrollably. He held her as tears streamed down both their faces. Tears of relief, disbelief, and gratitude. They stayed that way for what felt like eternity, just holding on to each other while the sun rose outside the window. 2 days later, Emma opened her eyes. "Mommy." Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Erasmus jolted awake, then covered her mouth to stifle a sob.
"Oh, sweetheart."
Levi moved closer, eyes glistening.
"Hey, little fighter." Emma blinked at him, confused.
"You're still here," he smiled softly. "I told you I would be." Erasmus brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "You scared us, baby?" Emma frowned faintly.
"Sorry, did I make you cry?"
Both of them laughed through their tears. Levi kissed Emma's hand gently. "Just a little. But you can make it up to us when you get better." Emma nodded sleepily. "Promise." And then, in a voice faint but full of warmth, she added, "I love you, Daddy." The word Daddy hung in the air like a blessing. Levi froze, unable to breathe for a moment. Then he smiled. A real, unguarded smile that softened every sharp line on his face. "I love you too, sweetheart," he whispered. Erasmus watched them, heart swelling until it hurt. That single word, Daddy, mended something in both of them she didn't even realize had been broken. Later that evening, as the clinic quieted, Levi stood by the window, watching the sunset turn the sky into gold and crimson. Erasmus joined him, their shoulders brushing. "She called you Daddy," she said softly. Levi smiled faintly. "It's the first time anyone ever has." "She meant it," Erasmus whispered. He turned to her, eyes reflecting the dying light. "And I'll never let her forget what it means." Erasmus looked at him for a long moment. The man who had once left her without a word, now standing beside her, humbled and human. "She almost died," she murmured. "But she didn't," Levi said.
"And neither did we." He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers.
"We'll take one day at a time."
"No contracts, no conditions, just us." Erasmus's eyes welled again, but this time with something softer. Hope. "Just us," she repeated, her voice trembling with quiet strength. Outside, the Alps glowed pink under the setting sun.
Inside, Emma slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, the heartbeat of a family reborn. The air in the Swiss clinic garden carried the faint scent of blooming lavender and freshly cut grass. It had been 3 weeks since Emma's last treatment, 3 long weeks of recovery, cautious optimism, and quiet miracles. Erasmus sat on a wooden bench beneath the willow tree, a sketchbook in her lap. She watched as Emma chased butterflies across the lawn, her laughter ringing through the crisp mountain air. It was the sound Erasmus thought she might never hear again. Light, effortless, alive. Levi stood a few steps behind, leaning against the railing, eyes never leaving his daughter. He still looked tired, but softer now, the shadows under his eyes replaced by something gentler, almost peace. "She's getting stronger," Erasmus said without turning around. Levi smiled faintly. "She's unstoppable, just like her mother." Erasmus glanced back at him, the sunlight painting golden edges on his hair.
"Don't give me that credit."
"She's your daughter too," he chuckled, stepping closer. "So that's a yes?"
"A yes to what?"
"To being her father." Erasmus's lips curved into a small, tearful smile. "I think she already decided that." Just then, Emma spotted them and ran over, her curls bouncing, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She climbed into Levi's lap without hesitation, her tiny hands gripping his shirt. "Are you my daddy now?" she asked, with that disarming innocence only children have. Levi froze, startled by the bluntness of her question.
Erasmus watched quietly, her heart beating fast. Levi swallowed hard, his voice gentle. "I always was, sweetheart. I just didn't know it until now." Emma studied his face as if she could read truth through his eyes, then nodded, satisfied. "Okay, can we draw together later, Daddy?"
The word daddy rolled off her tongue so naturally that Erasmus had to cover her mouth to hold back tears. Levi smiled, a real one this time, unguarded and tender. "Of course we can. But I have to warn you, I'm terrible at drawing," Emma giggled.
"That's okay."
"Mommy can help you?" Erasmus laughed softly, shaking her head. "Apparently I'm outnumbered now." Levi looked at her, eyes full of quiet warmth. "That's how families work, isn't it?" For a long moment none of them spoke. The wind rustled the leaves, birds sang faintly somewhere in the distance, and the mountains stood tall against the horizon, eternal and silent witnesses to the reunion unfolding below. Later that afternoon, Erasmus helped Emma paint at a small table near the garden's edge. The little girl's hands were smeared with bright colors, yellow for sunlight, blue for the sky, pink for the flowers. Levi watched from nearby, amused and fascinated, as if every stroke she made was a revelation. When Emma suddenly lifted her brush and said, "Daddy, you draw too," Levi hesitated, then sat down beside her. He dipped the brush into the blue paint and drew an awkward shape. Emma squinted at it. "What's that supposed to be?" He grinned sheepishly.
"A heart."
"I think." Erasmus laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, long forgotten. "It looks more like a potato." "Then it's a potato-shaped heart," he countered, mock serious. "One of a kind," Emma clapped her hands, delighted.
"A potato heart? That's our family logo."
They all burst into laughter, the sound mingling with the rustling leaves above them. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long golden streaks across the garden, Emma yawned and curled up on the bench, resting her head in Erasmus's lap. Within minutes, she was fast asleep, her small body wrapped in a warm blanket. Levi watched the scene quietly. Mother and daughter, framed by light. He'd never seen anything so perfect, so painfully fragile. "You were incredible through all of this," he said softly. Erasmus brushed a strand of hair from Emma's forehead.
"I wasn't. I was terrified every second. So was I," he admitted.
"But you never showed it. You fought for her, for both of us." Erasmus looked up, her eyes glistening. "I didn't have a choice." Levi stepped closer, kneeling beside the bench. "Maybe not, but you still did it. You never gave up." He paused, searching for words. "When I first saw you again, I thought fate was playing a cruel joke. But now I know it was giving me a second chance." Erasmus blinked, caught off guard. "Levi," he smiled faintly.
"Don't say anything, just—"
"Let me have this moment." The evening air grew colder, carrying the faint scent of roses from the garden's edge. Levi reached for Erasmus's hand, his thumb tracing slow, deliberate circles across her palm. "I spent years chasing things that didn't matter," he whispered. "Money, power, reputation. But when I almost lost you and her, I realized what I'd been missing." Erasmus's breath hitched.
"And what was that?"
He looked straight into her eyes.
"Home." For the first time, she didn't look away. "Then don't lose it again." "I won't," he said, his voice steady now.
"Not this time." They sat in silence as the first stars appeared above the Alps. The sky faded from gold to violet, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Levi brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You should sleep too," Erasmus smiled faintly. "I can't. I don't want this moment to end." He glanced at the sleeping child between them. "It doesn't have to." And for a long while they stayed like that, the three of them, framed by twilight and surrounded by the quiet hum of a world finally at peace. in that stillness. They weren't billionaire and teacher, or strangers bound by circumstance. They were simply a family, could be imperfect, scarred but whole. It had been almost 2 months since Emma's final treatment. The Swiss garden was now in full bloom. Roses, daisies, and wild tulips stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was sweet with spring, and laughter drifted through the courtyard where Emma chased bubbles, her curls glinting under the sun. Erasmus stood by the terrace, watching her daughter run. She could finally breathe again. The constant fear, the sleepless nights, the sterile hospital lights, all replaced by sunlight and the sound of life returning. She didn't know that Levi was standing just behind her, watching her with the same quiet reverence. He had spent weeks planning this day, waiting for the right moment. "Emma's energy is endless," he said with a soft chuckle, stepping closer. Erasmus turned, smiling. "She got that from you." "I'm not sure I've ever had that much energy." "Maybe not," she teased. "But you have her stubbornness." Levi raised a brow. "You mean her determination?" She laughed. "Call it what you want." For a moment, they just stood there, the kind of silence that felt warm, filled with unspoken gratitude. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, Levi walked toward the garden's center where a small path of white petals had been laid. Erasmus frowned slightly, realizing what was happening only when Emma came running toward her, holding a tiny bouquet of wildflowers. "Mommy," Daddy said, "I have to give you this." Erasmus knelt, taking the flowers. "Did he now?" Emma nodded eagerly, her voice bubbling with excitement.
"He said we're having a surprise."
Erasmus turned, and there he was. Levi stood beneath the arch of climbing roses, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark slacks, sleeves rolled up, wind tousling his hair. In his hand was a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "Levi," she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. He took a step forward, his voice calm but trembling slightly. "5 years ago I lost you because I was too proud, too blind, and too afraid to fight for what mattered." She shook her head gently, tears already forming.
"You didn't lose me, Levi. Life just
"Took us in different directions," he smiled faintly.
maybe, but it brought us back here, didn't it?"
She didn't answer, her throat too tight to speak. Levi opened the box, revealing a delicate ring. Not large or showy, but elegant, timeless. The kind of ring chosen not to impress, but to mean something. "The first time I asked you to marry me," he continued, "it was through a contract." Words on paper.
"A deal born out of desperation." He paused, eyes glistening.
"This time there's no contract, no terms."
"No conditions?" Erasmus's lips trembled. Levi took another step closer, his voice deepening.
"I'm asking you not as a CEO or as the man who hurt you, but as someone who finally understands what love is supposed to be." A single tear slid down her cheek. He smiled softly. "Erasmus Mitchell, will you marry me for real this time?" For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Even the wind quieted as if waiting for her answer. Behind them, Emma clasped her hands together, eyes wide with anticipation. "Say yes, Mommy!" Erasmus let out a shaky laugh through her tears, covering her mouth. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." Levi exhaled, a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, and slipped the ring onto her finger. The fit was perfect, Emma squealed, running up to them. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Levi crouched, taking her tiny hand in his. "We always were, sweetheart. But now the world will know it too." Erasmus knelt beside them, wrapping both of them in her arms. The three of them held each other, surrounded by sunlight and the gentle hum of bees and wind, the sound of peace. That evening, the garden glowed under the lantern lights. The clinic staff, who had quietly witnessed their journey, joined them for a small celebration. Someone played soft music on a violin, and Emma insisted on dancing barefoot on the grass. Levi extended a hand toward Erasmus. "May I have this dance?" She hesitated, smiling shyly. "There's no music." He gestured toward the horizon, where the faint melody carried through the evening air. "Then we'll make our own." As they swayed slowly, his hand resting gently on her back, Erasmus looked up at him, the man who had once walked away, now holding her as if he'd never let go again. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met again?" she asked softly. Levi shook his head. "No, because every version of this world would have led me back to you." She laughed through her tears. "That's the most unfairly romantic thing you've ever said," he grinned. "I've had time to practice." They danced until the sky turned deep blue, until Emma's laughter became soft murmurs of sleep in the background. When the night finally settled, Erasmus rested her head against his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. "This feels like forever," she murmured. He kissed the top of her hair.
"It is." She tilted her head up to meet his gaze.
"And no more contracts?" He smiled, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "No contracts, just vows and heart." She laughed softly, whispering, "Then it's the best deal I've ever made." Levi leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "Mine too." As the final lanterns flickered in the twilight, Emma stirred in her sleep,
murmuring a single word: home. And that was exactly what they had become, a home. A place where love was no longer a transaction, but a promise.
where wounds had turned into strength, and where three souls, once lost, had finally found their way back to one another.